Good morning, everyone. I want to give you a warm welcome to LAPADA leaders. I'm just going to sort of wait to introduce you just for a few more seconds because I'm delighted to say lots of you are joining us today. So just let you all come in from the waiting room. So this is our second edition in the second series of LAPADA Leaders, and I'm absolutely delighted to take us all out of the gloom and give us a little bit of kind of glamour and colour while we're kind of in bad news COVID nightmare, and look at where art meets fashion. And I've got two leaders in their field who actually really have spearheaded these disciplines, and that is Kerry Taylor, who runs Kerry Taylor Auctions, and I'll let you know a little bit more about her in a moment, and Connie Gray, who is co-founder of Gray M.C.A, who specialise in textiles and fashion illustration. So a warm welcome to both of you, and a warm welcome to all of our members and the people from the LAPADA kind of family joining us today. So Kerry and I met a little while ago at Sotheby's, but not quite as long ago. I mean, she really has kind of driven fashion and textiles in not just the UK, but internationally. She joined Sotheby's in Chester at the tender age of, I think, about 20, and became an auctioneer, one of the youngest auctioneers at 21. And she then moved to Sotheby's in Bond Street, where she started the fashion, costumes and textiles, or kind of reintroduced them really. And in 2003, along with me and a few others, she left the hallowed halls of Sotheby's, her own business, as a few other people did. And she then really could drive her passion for fashion forwards with Kerry Taylor Auctions. Kerry also is the go-to person for many TV and broadcast programs talking about fashion and haute couture, and also has written a few books on the subject, which could possibly make great Christmas presents this year.
Oh, thank you.
Kerry. And then on to Connie, who I believe actually started collecting fashion illustrations as a teenager. And then once she met Ashley Gray, her husband, and both of them, I'm proud to say, are LAPADA members, so that's a particularly warm welcome from that point of view. They started Gray M.C.A, which specialises in both textiles and fashion illustration. And I think it's probably fair to say, and we'll hear a little bit more about this, that really there wasn't much of a kind of collecting field, or people didn't really understand it as a collecting genre until Connie kind of brought it to the fore. And she also kind of advises both this side of the pond and in New York, and curates a series of annual shows, and always does something around London Fashion Week as well. So welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking you quite a general question, which is really, and I'm going to start first with Connie, what drew you to this discipline and fashion illustration generally?
Well, Freya, just as you rightly said in your very kind introduction, I have had a passion for this subject ever since I was a child. And I have always just been enamored by the essence of beauty that fashion illustration is, and the stories that these wonderful drawings and paintings tell, but in a very light-hearted, very simplistic way. They tell a story, and they absolutely capture the essence of every era that fashion illustration has been used in publications. But the crucial thing is that they are commercial drawings. So, and that's what always fascinated me, was that you'd look at these beautiful drawings and they'd be, very often they'd be unsigned, and they'd be telling a story about the model and the clothes, but there would be there was no backstory. They were very swift, just to the point of telling a story, and then you turn the page. And that's what I found fascinating about them.
Thank you. And we'll go a little more into sort of what we're looking for and how you can start building that collection. But Kerry, what took you into this? And I think you've kind of really started with very early fashion as well as right up to kind of more contemporary pieces. But take us through the kind of maybe starting this genre and building a whole collecting world around it, really, or collecting genre.
Well, for me, fashion is eternal. You know, I sell pieces from, including accessories, from the 16th century to today. So it's comme des garçons to slap sole shoes. I mean, and everything in between. And I suppose that if I was trying to give advice to a new collector who perhaps hasn't thought of haute couture or fashion as a collecting field before, I would say you really have to go with what you're passionate about, what you love. You know, some of my collectors just collect corsets. Some of them just collect Dior. Some of them just collect things that they can wear. Some of them would never wear the clothes, but they absolutely see them as an applied art, which I do. We have dealers, we have every major museum, we have actually dealers big and small. We have fashion houses. We have such a mixture of clients, and each person that comes in to see me has their own unique angle and view. It could be buttons, you know, it could be disco, it could be the 1920s, it could be fashion, or it could actually be the textiles too, like the one behind me. You've just got to go with what really fires you up. And I would say, if you're a new collector, you know, by all means go on our website. We've got the most incredible archive, and you can just dip in and look at all, especially if there is another lockdown, you can dip in and look at all these fabulous things, that tens and tens of thousands of things from all areas, and see what excites you, and then take it from there.
So Kerry, tell us a little bit about what is behind you, because I think it's going to come up in your auction, which is happening very soon.
Hopefully it's happening on October the 27th. It's by Michael O'Connell, a British textile artist. He was described as one of the last modernists, and it's from 1954, and it's called Atomic, and it's like these sort of little sparks and these connecting, I know, sort of electric, I don't know what it is, but it's sort of, it gives you this feeling of, I suppose, of fission. That's what I suppose it's meant to be. And it's in at £400 to £600, and it's very large. It's a beautiful piece, and we have other pieces by him too. That's my advert.
One of the things I forgot to say actually is that as you're watching, if you want to ask a question, and there'll be time for questions and answers at the end, just pop them in the Q&A box, and our colleague Gillian, who is also running the webinar, will kind of look at those questions. And if Connie and Kerry haven't kind of covered that subject, then we'll bring those questions at the end. So onto the kind of the bones, you sort of started talking about it a bit, Kerry, but Connie, when somebody wants to start a collection, I suppose a good thing is actually how much do they need to spend, and where do they start? What are the names that they should be looking for if they want to start collecting fashion illustrations?
Well, just as Kerry just said, I think that the most important thing above anything is always to try to look for what you love and what you respond to. And so in a sense, the financial side of it is less important. But there are some names, I mean, there are some real names who are market leaders, who are now reaching really quite considerable sums, which is astonishing considering, as you said in the introduction, up until really quite recently, fashion illustration has been completely passed over by the fine art market. So those two names that I would say are the market leaders is René Gruel, who had an incredibly long career as a fashion illustrator and is probably the most recognized. If you see a René Gruel image, it's something that instantly is recognizable. But he started, originally, he spearheaded Dior. When Dior started the House of Dior in 1947, Gruel was very much by his side in terms of doing the interiors, but also in terms of drawing the 1947 new look. And it really, he had an association with the House of Dior literally until the 1980s or early 1990s when he died. And the other name I would say is Antonio Lopez, better known as Antonio. And actually behind me, there's a wonderful Antonio of one of Antonio's girls, who was called Nancy. And we actually met her in Florida, and she allowed us to purchase this. And this is actually in our private collection, because we have a very rather like Kerry with an archive. We don't have tens of thousands of images in our archive, but we do have an archive which we are very purposely putting together with the very best names. But then, so those are the two names that are really big in terms of financial value. But then there are some absolutely stunning illustrators who were working in the sort of mid 20th century, such as Pierre Morgue or Bernard Blossac, and those are much more reasonable prices currently, that you can pick one of those works up when you can find them. And then there's literally artists, fashion illustrators who you can start collecting for sort of 450, 500 pounds. So I mean, you can go from 450 up to 50,000. So, you know, there's a big spectrum there. But buy what you love, what you respond to. Many people, particularly with the older fashion illustration, you know, respond to it because they say, God, that so reminds me of my mother, because of course, you know, their mothers in the 1950s or 60s or 70s were such glamorous, wonderful women, and they were wearing the clothes that are depicted in the fashion illustrations.
And actually, just to sort of pick up on your point, talking about movement and everything, what's the difference between a kind of fashion illustration and, if you like, a catalogue image, or in terms of a marketing image? How do you categorize that?
Fashion illustration is, I mean, to an effect, it is a marketing tool for sure. But where people get very confused is the difference between a fashion plate, a fashion design, and a fashion illustration. And a fashion design and a fashion plate were much more, well, a fashion plate is something from before, but a fashion design is a much more technical drawing, if you like. And that's, I'm very often asked why we don't specialize in that. There are a few fashion designers who were exquisite artists in their own right, such as Lagerfeld or Dior, but predominantly they're much more technical. They're a bit more sort of structured, focusing on the garment and less on the head and the legs and the arms. And for me, but fashion illustration is encompassing the technical of how a garment is put together so that it can be shown, but it's also about a story, as I keep saying, and so it's much more fluid. It's much more alive. You really have the movement of a fashion illustration, whereas a fashion design is very much rather like you're looking at me now. It's very straight on predominantly and doesn't have a lot of life in it.
Okay, thank you so much. So kind of thinking about stories and everything, and where this world has come from. Kerry, in terms of the word vintage, a little while ago, this kind of came up in a conversation we had before, that was really about rarefied wines. And now it seems to have kind of become the buzzword for everything. Where do you stand on this, and how do you define vintage?
I think that a lot of what's termed vintage by especially a lot of dealers is very often really nothing particularly special, what we used to call secondhand clothes. And I suppose for me, true vintage is something that's not just got a bit of age to it. It's got stylistically, it's important, it's strong. You know, I don't know, a 90 from M&S from the 1960s. I would just see that as an old 90. Whereas something that's like a paper dress, something that was inexpensive to make in the 1960s, printed with an eye or a cat or the Eiffel Tower or whatever. That, you know, to me is something that's more special. That's true vintage. I've gone into shops and I've seen homemade things with tags saying haute couture. That's another description that's really bandied about, when in fact haute couture is high fashion. It's the creme de la creme, with hand-locked seams inside and specifically made for an individual client. And the fashion houses themselves are culprits too. I mean, if you, for example, come across a Versace dress which says couture on the label, it means it's ready to wear, actually. It's only if it says atelier that it is actually alta moda, haute couture. So Givenchy is another one that puts couture on ready to wear label. So it can be very confusing for people. But for me, it's just got to have that essence of strength in its design for it to be true vintage and not just an old coat.
And if I wanted to get myself a rather nice little Givenchy little black dress or coat, what would I need to start? What budget would I need to start to acquire something like that?
I mean, from our auctions, we probably start at about £150 upwards. You can buy an haute couture suit by Coco Chanel or Balenciaga or Givenchy for probably around £600, for example, which is cheaper than a lot of ready-to-wear that you'll find in shop now. And it will be by the master. It will be by the creator. It will be by not by their own hand, but it will be by their atelier. So for me, I think that this market, not only is it a great one in terms of collecting, but it's just good value. You know, it's been, a lot of it's very underpriced still. There are bargains in every sale always.
I think it chimes very well, doesn't it, with the sort of the whole of the antique sector, actually, that you're not just sort of recycling, you're actually reusing or repurposing. And these things have not just stayed the course of time because of the quality with which they're made, but you know, also they've collected that history along the way and still remain very good value and are not costing the earth to purchase any of these things, which is kind of whether a table or a dress or an illustration, it is all the same, which is,
I mean, it's a strange market in the sense that you have this vast area that's really affordable. And then, for example, I think I sent you a slide of a Dior gown Fuso line from 1957, you know, which we sold for £20,000.
Do you have that, Gillian, to show?
Yeah.
Or
you should do.
Hopefully. Just in case.
Sorry, yeah, let me just. First time doing this.
Here it comes.
Okay.
Have we got it?
Can you see this?
Oh, that's a René Boucher.
Right,
Wait.
that's okay. Well, these are my slides.
Sorry, which one was it?
It was Dior 1957, red.
What? Red. There we go.
Oh,
okay. So this is a piece which would appeal to a museum. It would also appeal to a private collector, and it would also appeal to someone who could buy it to wear. So that's why this did so terribly well, because it's a strong colour, great in museum setting, but you're going to have a lot of people sort of fighting for this piece. We do sell things for as much as well over £100,000, and they don't necessarily have to be old. I think I just saw the Balenciaga wedding dress, which made a world record price. I don't know if you've got that slide ready. Balenciaga, which, oh yeah, that's it. Okay, so that one is, there you can see that being worn. Something like this, again, is probably going to be destined for a museum, because as you can see, it's so sculptural, and that's what we love about Balenciaga. It's got this veil that's, again, streamlined to fit in with the shape of the dress. And, you know, again, 60,000 is not an unusual price for you know, something of this rarity and something that's so, it's a fashion moment basically. So they can be, you know, they can be super expensive, or they can be very inexpensive and wearable.
Thank you. And given that I've just seen that someone's popped in a comment from Australia, so thank you so much for attending from there. Just thinking about where your clients come from, kind of far and wide, to you and to Connie, do you know, is there much crossover between your clients? And in fact, do you end up kind of working together sometimes, because you're representing two very different sides of this, art, you know, fashion and art? So maybe start to Connie first. Are you?
Absolutely. First of all, Kerry has been a wonderful source of illustrations through her sales. But we've bought work from her, and I know that she's bought work from us. And there was a particular, actually it was Balenciaga, I think, by Ericsson, wasn't it, Kerry?
Yes.
I think you have an image of it by Carl Ericsson. It's a yellow dress, Gillian, if you can find that.
It's got a big red coat.
And a big red coat, and it's and I think in your in one of the Vogues that that's coming up for auction, you actually found that one. There we go.
Yeah, this is hanging in my sitting room.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's gone.
I love fashion. What I love about this sketch is that it just it's unlike a photograph. It just evokes so much more, as Connie was saying, the elegance, I don't know, that whole style of the period. And I've got some masses of Vogues in my auction, which I'm plugging again on October the 27th. And I was flicking through doing condition reports, and I came across it, which was delightful for me. So
it is always such a joy. That's what a lot of my research is when we get the original drawings, because that's so important. Is none of the drawings that we specialize in, none of them are prints. Every single one is the original drawing. So the original drawing that Kerry has here by Eric from 1954, that was then obviously published. And why they're so rare is because it was commissioned for the Vogue, for the page in Vogue, and then effectively the artist is paid, in this case Eric, and then the illustration more often than not was then just thrown away because its job was done. So when you actually come across you source, you find, you discover the original drawing such as this, and then you match it up with, you find the publication that it's been published in. That of course adds to the provenance, but it adds to the excitement of, and then when Kerry has the actual dress, for instance, this Balenciaga, if she then had this dress in one of her sales because someone's brought that in for her, that's a beautiful unison. It's a perfect marriage.
It is. And again, the research is one of the things I love the most about my field, because I spend so many hours poring over old magazines and photographic archives, and trying to get access into museums to look at archives too. Because if I can find an image, be it a photograph or a sketch or whatever, or someone wearing it, a celebrity even, from, you know, the 1920s onwards, that adds to the value. I mean, it is like the Holy Grail. You just try to, all the time, you know, you something comes in, you think, I must find this, or at the moment there are some pieces, and I believe one of them to be Chanel and one of them Lanvin, and I know I've seen them in over 40 years of doing this. I know in the past somewhere I've seen them, and so I have to sort of then go looking for that needle in the haystack to prove it, because if the pieces are unlabeled, that's what I do.
Absolutely. And
great fun.
It is great fun, but it can be, I'm sure you find this as well, Kerry, it can be incredibly frustrating, because as you say, you know that picture, you know you've seen it. Yeah. Or equally with us, when we discover an illustration, sometimes when you look on the back of it, there's lots of scrawling from either the artist or the printer or the fashion editor about, you know, what page it's going to be on or whatever. But sometimes there's absolutely no information at all, and that's when it becomes a real a discovery process.
Kind of the ever kind of detective work, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
An auctioneer, and that kind of provenance is king. On that, I was going to ask you a little bit about provenance, but you've nicely gone into that yourselves. But I wanted it to sort of give the opportunity, and start with you, Kerry, about some of the amazing collections you've worked on, and the kind of the value provenance can add to some of these things.
Gosh, there have been so many. I have the largest ever collection of Audrey Hepburn's wardrobe to come on the open market, and I think that was in the early 2000s. And I think anyone who bought in that auction, they can add zeros now to the purchases, because you know that's gone through the roof. But that was such an honour to handle this haute couture wardrobe made by Givenchy. That was incredible. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor, style icons, him especially, that was memorable. But it goes, Princess Diana, I've sold so many of her gowns, again, outside of the Christie's auction she did. I think we've sold more than anyone. And we keep discovering them, because she gave things sometimes to friends or to charity shops. So little by little, we find more, which is always great fun. And then we research them and prove that. More recently, we've had incredible pieces that were worn on stage and from the wardrobe of Bjork, including fabulous couture by Iris van Herpen, which like sort of couture, they're like couture celluloid space alien dresses. I mean, they're just wonderful. And in fact, just last week, the week before, I had the incredible wardrobe of the late Annabelle Nielsen, who was Lee Alexander McQueen's best friend, arguably. They loved one another, and she died tragically a few years ago. And it was pieces from Highland Rape right the way through to Sarah Burton. And with that sale, what was important really was the provenance. There were some unique pieces, but actually the fact that she had been his muse, he dedicated the Joan fashion show to her. Their closeness, the fact that she worked together with him on so many collections, made each one of these pieces so much more special. And so we had lots of museums and private collectors, especially wanting to have something from Annabelle's collection. And I think that's a great tribute to her and her personal style too.
And amazing. I remember working with you on a slightly less glamorous prize that Queen Victoria was as sort of tall as she was wide.
Right.
Dresses that came from Castle Howard, I remember that.
Castle Howard, yes, exactly. That was an amazing collection. I spent weeks in a very dark sort of brick-built building in the end of in their garden with a couple of strip lights in sub-zero conditions, and practically needed a torch on my head to go through. And yeah, no, that was memorable, definitely.
Connie, given the sort of ephemeral nature of some of the illustrations, this sort of throwaway culture, where do you source? Apart from sometimes finding them in Kerry's auctions, but
well, Kerry's auctions is that's the easy route. That makes me so happy. Whenever she has she's very sweet, because she tends to send me an email and say, look, there's this. But no, 9 times out of 10, it's literally, as you said about it being a detective, is a detective work. Most of the drawings come from people who've worked in the industry, either directly themselves, they were in publishing, or they worked for Vogue or Harper's or the New York Times or whoever, or their families. And Ashley and I spend a great deal of time, and I'm not joking. Like Kerry, you were in a brick building in a garden. I'm very often up a ladder in either under beds or up a ladder in attics, because someone's contacted me and said, I think I've got a picture by, well, I'm not quite sure, but I think it's a fashion drawing. And then they'd send me an image if they can. And then I'm up this ladder, and I found the most amazing shocking things literally on top of wardrobes, and they've never seen the light of day since however they got there in the first place. And then it's then the detective work, but because they are, again, this thing about being commercial drawings, apart from, thank God, fashion illustrators from about the 1980s, like Kenneth Paul Block, whose archive we look after. Antonio's another one who kept every single piece of work they ever did, thank God, and demanded it back. But any of the earlier illustrators, they didn't view their work as precious, so they didn't care what happened to it. And for instance, Vogue front covers are always a wonderful find, and a recent one came from an apartment in LA, from a lovely old lady who had known Gruor but had forgotten that she even had it until she found it and contacted us. And because we are the sort of specialists, the leaders in this field, thank goodness now people find us.
I bet I should think that now when they kind of Google fashion illustration, you come up kind of top, I hope. So
no, we do.
So on that kind of, where can people learn more? What online resources or what collections and archives exist that people could go and see, and maybe, I suppose, online, particularly at the moment, but also what are the kind of the museum collections that are worth looking at, Kerry?
I think there are a few. The V&A website's okay. It's not always very accurate though, and but there's a lot of things to look at. The Metropolitan Museum, again, that's really a good one. Again, it's not always terribly accurate, sorry to say. FIT has a good website. The Palais Galliera has a good website. I think those are the ones that I look at. I used to look at L'Officiel, which was the textile manufacturer's Bible. It was a fashion magazine. And for years, I was able to just log into that, put in Cardin or whatever, and search through the decades. But that's, for some reason, disappeared now. So I'm trying to build my own visual archive of Vogue. So that's what I do of an evening. But I would say those, and of course, as I say, my website is, it's free, it's there, and it's got so many wonderful things to look at.
And Connie, for you, you're involved in FIT, I think. Are you not?
Yeah, no, I am. We're on the I'm on the board of the Frances Needy collection, which is probably one of the most important fashion illustration archives, certainly in America and possibly in the world. And it is a dream, absolute dream, to be able to view. The Courtauld Institute of Art, they have I'm on a board there, and they have a very interesting archive and are incredibly knowledgeable. Parsons, or a New School, I think, in America, that has a very good archive which it can be viewed online. And us, of course, we're building this visual archive, but it's fashion illustration. It's a difficult one to really. There isn't a sort of, apart from FIT, really, there isn't an absolute strict place to go, because it's always been slightly missed until recently. And in the big fashion exhibitions that are put on, because I now say that, like, fashion is so fashionable. And for instance, the 100 years of fashion at the National Gallery a few years ago, I was so excited. 100 years of Vogue. I was so excited about that. And there was a Cecil Beaton, and I think there were 2 Erics in the whole exhibition, and I couldn't believe it, because I thought, hang on, fashion illustration is such an important, integral part of the story of Vogue, let alone anyone else. But you are beginning to see more. There was an exhibition at the Denver Fine Art Museum recently that was dedicated to one specific fashion illustrator. Otherwise, the Society of Illustrators in New York, now that is a very beautiful It's a very beautiful museum, small museum, but also has a wonderful archive. And I really recommend anybody, they have a great restaurant as well, anybody who's lucky enough to be in New York in the next 10 years, shall we say, should absolutely visit the Society of Illustrators, because they have an amazing archive.
I meant to ask you, and I haven't, is in terms of displaying and hanging illustrations, presumably it's the same sort of rules as kind of drawings, in that if you can have glass that it, you know, has a UV filter and things like that. But what's your kind of preferred way of showing, really, in framing? And
well, I absolutely believe, because I believe they are fine art, I frame all our works. Obviously, if they need to be slightly helped in terms of conservation, you know, we have them. We have a very excellent paper conservationist, and then they're laid down if necessary. And then, yes, absolutely, everything is to exhibition or museum quality of glass and all of that. But I'm not. But at the same time, I don't want people to be precious about fashion illustration in terms of. I want it to be on people's walls. I want people to enjoy it, just like Kerry's got that Eric on her wall in her sitting room. It's something to be absolutely enjoyed and looked at, and not to be tucked away. Don't tuck fashion illustration away. Put it on your walls.
and you, in terms of, I mean, obviously some things, as you say, people buy it to wear. Sometimes it's for museum collections. If you are an amateur collector, so you're not in a kind of a museum conditions, how should you kind of keep people, you know, keep the moths away, as apart from anything else?
Well, they're a bit of a problem. I mean, I would say that if you're a new collector, try and buy something that doesn't need conservation work. Try and buy something that's easy to begin with. Conservation's expensive, and although you'll get something much cheaper, it may not be worth it in the long run. Don't cut the things. Never cut something. If you have to make something smaller, make a tuck or whatever, but make it reversible. Once you cut into a garment, that's it really. I would keep moth traps in the wardrobe room. Excuse me. They're like sticky strips, and the male moth will fly in. They've got pheromones, and they'll stick to it, and that you'll kill those male moths. But what it will do is it will alert you to the fact you've got moths, and once you see you've got those horrible little yellow caramel coloured wing things stuck to there, you really have to fumigate as well.
Yeah.
If you find you've got moth in a garment, you should put it in plastic and then put it in the freezer for 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Or, excuse me, if you've got, dry cleaning will also kill moths. But if you've got tons of it, it's better to get a chest freezer and just put everything in there for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And just keep monitoring. Unfortunately, once you get moths, you can very rarely get rid of them completely, unless you have no carpets and no curtains. But things like beds, they love. So if they get out of your wardrobe into your bed, you're probably stuck with them for a long time. You can get them heat treated. There's a place called Thermalignum in London, and you can hire a van, and you can get your bed, and you can take it. And what they do is they treat it at a very low temperature, so you can kill moths that way. But obviously that's super expensive. I've had to do that myself, and it's super expensive. And you hope it works. That should kill the eggs. That should do. It's the eggs that are the problem, because once the larvae hatch, that's when the damage happens. They start eating their way through. So those are some top tips on moths.
It's very good, and I'm sure Lakeland will employ you for testimonials soon for all of their moth products. Before we go on to take some of the questions, I've got one last question for you both. So I think I'll start with Connie. What's the most exciting thing you've handled to date, and what is the holy grail that you're still hoping or itching to get your
The Holy Grail, basically, but I know this is rather a bizarre answer, but because fashion illustrations, the original ones, are so rare, and for instance, Drawing on Style, which is this exhibition that we put on every year during Fashion Week in London and New York, it takes at least 18 months or 2 years to bring this illustration show together, because they are so difficult to come by. You know, it is not a question of just just finding them willy-nilly. So any fashion illustration by any of the artists from the 20th century is just a joy, and I get shivers down me, especially when I recognize it. So works by Gruel, by Boucher, by Eric, but then also we now work with contemporary illustrators, very top masters, or what I consider to be masters of fashion illustration. And we recently have started working with the most wonderful American illustrator who worked in predominantly the 70s and 80s, called Stephen Stippleman. I think there may be an image that you could pull up. It's called Intensity. Now, when I first came across when I met him in New York just before lockdown, and was privileged to be taken into his studio and seen the incredible work, that was a holy grail moment. And Bill Donovan, who is the Dior, he's currently the fashion, the artist in residence for Dior. Again, there should be a picture that is available to view. I feel so privileged to be working with these artists who are working today, and who really are the absolute, they're leading the fashion for fashion illustration, because it is beginning to become much more fashionable again, and is the perfect genre or medium for fashion at the moment, of course, because runway shows aren't taking place. You only need, there's no, photographers can't work because they have to have stylists and lighting people and makeup and hair, whereas a fashion illustrator, literally him or her in a room with a model, or if you can't be in the room with a model, you can be doing it like we're doing it right now. David Downton has just done a series for this latest Fashion Week, and he did the whole thing on Zoom, as far as I'm aware. And it's just so exciting to see these clothes, whether they're Dior 2021 or whether they're Dior 1947, be brought to life in an artistic manner.
Amazing, thank you. And Kerry, what about you? Can you pick one thing, or is that too hard?
It's really hard. I think the thing that makes me most proud is when I go to the Victoria and Albert Museum and I see, and in fact, most museums in the world, when they have an exhibition, there's usually at least one KTA piece, if not more. I mean, that gives me a huge thrill. But I remember taking my sons to the V&A when they were smaller, and there's this fabulous wedding suit, which is 1673, made of brown wool, covered in gold and silver passementerie lace, and has these massive, big balloon-shaped breeches, very long skirt, with this embroidered garter badge, which belonged to King James when he was waiting for his bride to be. It was his wedding suit. He went to Dover Beach and he stood there with the light twinkling on the lace, waiting for Mary of Modena to get off the boat, basically, and become his new young second wife. And I think I love that piece because it's menswear, which is rare. It's a beautiful object. It's so rare, and it has this wonderful provenance, the romance. It's royal, it's romantic, it's just so dandyish and outrageous and wonderful and warm. It's sensible, no silk, warm wool, and I just love that. And the fact that it's there, that just and so many of these things are. It's just so wonderful for me. I think in terms of what would I love to find? It's so difficult. I'm trying to think. I'd love a Paul Poiret lampshade dress, maybe from 1911. I think that would be amazing. That's a very fragile thing, so the chances of me finding one of those are sort of next to nothing. And really, you know, maybe a 1947 bar ensemble, Christian Dior's Corolle line, his New Look line in 1947. Most exhibitions show reproductions of that, and I'd really love to find the real thing. That's what I would love to find. One of those, just one complete bar suit.
Well, yeah, hopefully everyone's hearing that. Maybe that. Gillian, you're obviously having a little trouble with the slides, but are you able to do the Q&As and extract some questions, or would you like me to have a look? Are you...
Yes, I have the questions here. So we'll start with one for Connie, which someone said that they love fashion illustration, but they would like advice on how to use them at home. Can I have more than one together on a wall, even if they are different styles?
Oh, absolutely. Fill your walls. And that's something that we love about fashion illustration, is that you can hang it not just against fashion, not like side by side with fashion, another fashion illustration, but you can hang it alongside any different genre of art. I've seen fashion illustration in bathrooms, I've seen it in kitchens, I've seen it in drawing rooms, I've seen it in dining rooms. It works in every room in the house. And just have fun with it. When I'm hanging drawing on style, for instance, whether it's in London or New York, I'm always slightly looking for a story. So I'll take a color theme if necessary, just to try and but it can be different. It can be a 1940s work against a 1980s or a 2010. Just so long as there's a story, there's a sort of flow between them, I would say. And if you frame them if you do the same framing, that obviously always helps to tie different pictures together.
Thank you. Gillian, is there, I think we probably have time for two or three more questions before we wrap.
Perfect. So this one is for Kerry. If you're buying vintage to wear, how is best to clean garments?
It really depends what it is. There's no one rule fits all kind of thing. I mean, if it's cotton, you can probably wash it. If it's silk, it would probably need a specialist dry cleaner. It just depends what it is, really. I think cotton things are fairly sturdy, so you should be able to at least hand wash them. I probably avoid washing machines where possible. But other than that, I think it's just common sense.
Great, thanks. And then another one for Connie. Do you have a favorite fashion illustration, and what does it transmit to you when you look at it?
Do I have one particular fashion illustration or an artist?
I think you could answer that either way, or what does it
one particular, no, can't, there's too many, but my absolute loves is Eva René Boucher from the 1940s and 50s, and I don't know if you can pick up a slide there. It's Elizabeth Arden, and there's a girl with her hand on her face, and it's the original I just think that is just so of its period. It's 1949, and that was plastered all over Vogue, Harper's, every magazine during that period, and that was what the beautiful women would be wearing. And I just love it. Just evokes a woman getting ready. She's just, it's just perfect. And it's an advertising piece, which is slightly unusual. Otherwise, if we go to Bill Donovan, Schiaparelli, which is Boucher, hang on, just go back, that one. That is 1947, 48. That is the New Look, which Kerry was just talking about. I just adore that by René Boucher. And then coming right into sort of more today's world, if you go to, that's René Gruot, he's the sort of great master. This is Stephen Stippleman. I was just talking, go back one. That one. Stephen Stippleman works in paint only, very unusual. He's the one in New York that I came across earlier this year as the whole archive, which is incredible. And then just go to yellow, a yellow Bill Donovan, keep going, that one. Every time I see his work, I'm lucky enough to see him. We run a lot of masterclasses with him, but also I'm lucky enough to see him work in his studio. And I am breathless with Bill's work every time. The stature of that is just extraordinary.
Brilliant, thank you. There was another thing I sort of picked on, Julian, for Kerry, I think, is that if you were going to start collecting vintage fashion, what would be the sort of first thing you should buy? To start, obviously something you like, but what would be a kind of a good piece to build a collection around?
Is this for wearing or for collecting?
Well, that is not entirely specific on the question, so you answer it how you would like, I would say.
Okay, well, again, it's really difficult. It goes back to me saying, you know, it's got to be just something that you love and you build around that. I'm just thinking of a friend, a client of mine. She will only buy things that she wears. She'll choose things that are in good condition, that fit her, that don't need alteration. And she likes very glamorous evening wear. And she has a penchant for black and gold and luxury furs and things like that. So that could be one way to go. And again, all of these are accessible from £150 upwards, £150 to £100,000 and anywhere in between. If it's someone who wants to just collect as a work of art, then I would go for really fine pieces, buy the masters, again in good condition. Try and avoid black, try and go for strong colours, because again, these display well. And most people who collect fashion ideally have an eye to display at some point or other, rather than just having it in the wardrobe. And something sculptural, so maybe Balenciaga would be a good one to start with. You could start with an inexpensive little suit and then work your way up from there. Perhaps that would be a good one. If you love Christian Dior and you can't afford haute couture, and very few of us can, at the upper levels, again, Christian Dior London's very affordable. And these are the haute couture designs that have been made as ready to wear from 1953 onwards in London. And they're great. So you get all of the Dior style and the look. You don't have the hand finishing, but it's true Dior design. And those are both wearable and collectible. So that might be a good one.
It's the name out, doesn't it? I mean, it's those signed pieces.
Can I just interrupt, which is a slight plug for Gray M.C.A, but as Kerry's talking about Dior, on the 12th of November, we have an amazing fashion illustrator called Gladys Parent-Palmer, and we're running a series of fashion illustration masterclasses, virtual obviously, and she is going to be focusing on the Dior from early days when Dior was working under Piquet and Lelong, and then through obviously New Look. And then after his death, for instance, Mark Bolan, I think it was Mark Bolan, wasn't it, Kerry, who did London, Dior London before he was appointed creative director.
That's right, he did, yeah. Yes, exactly.
So he went from, initially Dior London, and then he was appointed main designer or creative director for Paris. And so Gladys is going to be illustrating the entire history of Dior from his early days right up until literally last week's or 2 weeks ago's runway show in Paris. So please, anyone who's interested in fashion illustration, fine art, fashion, all of those things, just look on our website and you can join the masterclass.
Thank you so much.
I will do that.
Very cheeky. I'm sorry to do that plug.
I mean, I think that what we'll probably do is when we put the link of this up, we'll mention the auction and your event, and then links to your websites as well, because so people can continue to kind of see more, and hopefully start investing in some of these things. So it remains for me to say thank you so much. The time has gone very fast, but it has been wonderful, I think, to bring a little bit of glossiness and colour as the days draw in, it gets colder, and we're going to be in more. Hopefully we can just parade around in our finest dresses at home. Who needs to wear lamp, kind of get glamorous wherever we are, I think. And I will certainly be tuning in for the masterclass, and I will also be watching the auction. I think there's also some rather lovely job lots of Vogue if you want to kind of while away the hours of that as well. So thank you very much, Connie and Kerry. Thank you to Gillian working in the background. I'm sorry that the slides were proving a little bit more challenging. And thank you as well to our partner Cultural Communications, who we work with on this LAPADA series. So hope to see you again soon. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.